Advanced functions, pipeline input. Now this is one of the more complex but useful things that you can do with an advanced function. Give it the ability to accept input from the pipeline just like a normal Windows PowerShell command. Now in this nugget, I'm going to show you how to set up this advanced function so that it can accept pipeline input both by value, meaning accepting an entire data type, such as a string from the pipeline, or by property name. I'm going to show you how to code all this up so that it works, but not only so that it works accepting pipeline input, but that the function can work either way, meaning it'll work if you provide pipeline input for one or more parameters, but it will also work if you simply specify values on those parameters. Getting a function to do both things is a little bit trickier. Not a lot of code though, fortunately. So once you kind of know the trick, it's pretty easy. I'll be using the same getDiskSpaceInfo function that I used in the prior two nuggets. So if you've not already watched those, you should watch those so you can see how I got to where I am right now. Now I want to start by creating pipeline input capabilities for this computer name parameter. And the way to do that is in this main parameter attribute thingy, value from pipeline equals true, and value from pipeline by property name, yep, you have to type it all, equals true. True, not tour. So here's what this is doing. If you remember, and we covered this a dozen nuggets ago probably, there are two ways for a parameter like computer name to pick up data out of the pipeline. And you have to tell PowerShell which it is. The first is by value, meaning if a string, because I defined computer name as a string, if a string is piped in from the pipeline, then PowerShell will see, computer name is what I do with strings from the pipeline, and it'll attach it to here. The trick with this is you can only have one parameter rigged up with this attribute per data type. For example, drive type is also a string. I could not mark this as value from pipeline because then I would have two strings matched up with value from pipeline, and when PowerShell saw strings in the pipeline, it's going to have to ask itself, okay, there's some strings in the pipeline. Which parameter do I put them with? Well, computer name can take it, and drive type can take it, and I'm just going to sit here and cry. So you can only have one per data type rigged up. Now, if I had another parameter that was an integer, let's say, I could have that take value from pipeline because PowerShell will determine between them based on the data type. Now, you can have as many rigged up for value from pipeline by property name as you want to because that doesn't base off of the data type, it bases off the parameter name. So what this one means is if there's an object in the pipeline that is not a string, right? Remember, by value gets done first. So if there's a string in the pipeline, this is going to take effect, this is going to grab that string. If there's an object in the pipeline that is not a string, PowerShell is going to shift into by property name mode, and then it's going to look to see if that object has a computer name property, because that would be spelled the same as the parameter. And if it has a computer name property, then the contents of that property will get hooked up to this parameter. Now, it will do that by property name for as many different parameters as you have. So I'm also going to rig this one up. Value from pipeline. I'm aware I could have copied and pasted. Shut up. Pipeline by property name equals true. Typing practice is good. Okay. Now I'm going to run through and show you how these work. But before we do that, there's a little bit you have to know about how functions run once they're accepting pipeline input. And you'll notice that when I very first created this function, I added this begin, process, and end script block. All of the code in my function right now lives in process. Here's what happens. When I run this function the way I've been running it, get disk space info minus computer name 1, 2, 3. All right, if I run that like that, then the computer name parameter will contain 3 values, 1, 2, and 3. And that's because I set this up to accept multiple values. The entire function will run right from top to bottom. It will basically ignore the begin and the end words there. It's just going to run all the code from top to bottom. And the reason I have this for each loop is so that I can go through those 3 computer names, or however many there are, one at a time. That's a pretty straightforward model. However, if I were to take 3 strings, and I need to put these in quotation marks so that PowerShell sees them as strings rather than as command names, and I pipe those to get disk space info, now when my function runs, it's going to run whatever's in the begin block first. Then PowerShell is going to put one computer name into the computer name parameter and execute the process block. Now inside my process block, I'm still going to go for each computer in computer name, but it's only going to happen once because there's only one computer in computer name. Then PowerShell is going to put the second pipeline object. Now in this case would be 3 because I typed them out of order. It's going to put the second one in there and run process again. Then it will put the last one in there and run process again. So in this mode, the parameter computer name only ever contains one value, and PowerShell uses this process block to figure out where my function's actual code is. After it has run process with the last pipeline object, it will run whatever is in end. Now, I don't have anything in begin and end. It would be completely legitimate just to take them out, throw them away, delete them. I like to leave them there kind of for the structure so that I can kind of see the structure is complete. But what would you use those for? Well, if you had any setup to do, maybe I want to establish a database connection. I could set that up here and then reuse it here and then close it in the end block. So begin is kind of for setup, process is you actually doing the work, and the end block is for any cleanup that you need to do to take care of whatever you set up. So that's really the only coding change we need to make. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to remove the module from memory over here in the console. I'm not sure if it's loaded, but just to make sure. Now I want to run this in 3 different ways. The first thing I want to do is run get disk space info with just a plain computer name, client localhost. So this is the same way I've been doing it. I just want to make sure it works. And obviously I'm on the client, so that runs twice the same way. In fact, if we want, we can dc dot lab. There we go, lab.pri. All right, so we get 3 different computers that way. Now let's try piping in strings. Client dc pipe to get disk space info. Oh, and because I didn't put the fully qualified domain name, DC is going to take a minute. But you can see it's working. It's already gone out and grabbed client because it knows how to resolve that quickly. So I've piped in. That means the strings were taken from the pipeline and they were attached one at a time to the computer name parameter. So let's do something else here. Let's make this a little bit more interesting. Let's up the stakes a bit. I'm going to put dc.lab.pri and client, and we'll put localhost at the top just to give us some variety. I'm going to save this as computers.txt. It looks like I already had one, but we're going to keep that one. Okay, it eventually did finish and get that DC. So if I do get content, computers.txt, it's producing 3 string objects. Now that's really important to understand. You've got to remember that get content isn't just spewing the whole text file right into the pipeline. If I pipe this to get member, this is proving that what I'm getting out is a system.string, right? Same as my computer name parameter accepts. And let's do this, because this is the real test. It's producing 3. The way get content works is each line of a text file gets put into the pipeline as an individual string. Text file has 3 lines. I got 3 strings. That means I should be able to pipe those strings to get disk space info, and boom, it picked them up, baby. So that covers the value from pipeline side of this equation. Let's cover the interesting one. Let's do this. Notepad comps.csv. Yes, create a new file. I'll put name and type. So we'll do localhost and local drives. We'll do dc.lab.pri and local drives, and we'll do client and local drives. Save. Now, I'm not going to do get content, because if I do get content, comps.csv, See, it's reading just the individual lines of the file one at a time. That's not really what I wanted to do here. I wanted to run import CSV comps.csv because this is going to parse the CSV file. Each line in the file becomes an object, and my header row determines the properties. So this set of objects has a name property and a type property. So let's see what happens when I pipe it to get disk space info. Womp, womp, womp. The RPC server is unavailable. The RPC server is unavailable. Here's what happened. I had these objects, 3 of them, in the pipeline. They were not strings, and so value from pipeline did not take effect. Instead, PowerShell did value from pipeline by property name, but my property names are name and type. I don't have a parameter in here called name and type. I have parameters called computer name and drive type. That means PowerShell did not attach any data to any parameters, but because there were 3 objects in the pipeline, it went ahead and ran this process block 3 times. That means the process block tried to run with an empty computer name. It ran the WMI query right here, but there was no computer name, so of course the RPC server was unavailable. How can we fix that? Well, we could go edit the CSV file, but I don't want to. I want to do it the hard way. I'm going to create a computer name parameter out of the old name parameter, comma, and I'm going to create a drive type property out of the old type property. Now I have a computer name property and a drive type property which matches the spelling of the parameter names in my function, and now it works. I'll show you another way I could have potentially addressed that. Let's change the computer name property that I produced, because I want you to guess if this is going to work or not. I'm going to change this to machine name. So I have 3 objects. Each one has a machine name property and each one has a drive type property. Is that going to work over here or not in my function? Play the little Jeopardy song in your head while you decide. Get disk space info. It does work because property names will also attach to parameter alias names like that. And that's another reason. So we did aliases in the previous nugget. That's another reason to load up aliases onto a parameter. If you know that this function is going to be accepting pipeline input and you know that the objects have got a particular property name, so let's say, I'm going to give you the perfect ultimate example. Get AD computer minus filter star. Each of these has a name property. All right, so these objects have a name property, and the name property is the actual computer name. There is no property called machine name, and there is no property called computer name. But if I do this, will it work? Womp, womp, wah. Let's see. It says it can't bind argument to parameter computer name because it's an empty array. Yeah, that happens sometimes. What do I need to do here? Why did it do that? Well, probably because I've got too many aliases. One thing we can check. Let's see. Let's just do get disk space info minus name. See, it's not tab completing name, and I'll bet you it's not tab completing host name either, or machine name. Yeah, machine name it'll do because it was first. See, no, you know what? I'm being so stupid. Remove module example. You know, I'm kind of glad I did that because this is one way you can pound your head against a brick wall. I was going to go in here and start making changes to this, thinking in my head that I had done something wrong in the code. I got to save it. I got to remove the old version from memory. Let's try this again. This will force it to reload it. Okay, still didn't work, but get disk space info. I want to see if it's parameter completing name. It is. And I know what the problem is here. I'm going to tell you in just a second, but I want to see if you can figure it out too. So those both worked. Whenever you have a problem with a PowerShell command, back it off. Just back off one command and see what's in the pipeline. See if you can think about it. It's because I'm using this name property. It doesn't actually contain the fully qualified name. It creates problems. Got a couple other things going on here too, but I don't want to dig too deep down the rabbit hole because we're going to play with this a little bit in the next nugget. The point of this, though, is that one use of aliases is so that it's easier for your function to pick up pipeline input that's coming from a known type of object that you know is going to have a parameter property name mismatch. Rather than you having to fix it in the pipeline using select object, you could choose to write your function in a way that accepted it while still having a primary parameter name that is consistent. So computer name is consistent with the rest of what PowerShell does. So we're going to kind of leave this right here for pipeline parameter binding. There's a little bit more we're going to play with in this function. It's going to make it get a little bit more complicated. So I don't want to go too far down that path without just kind of stopping here because we've done everything we need to do to make pipeline parameter binding work. So there you have it. It's really just a couple more attributes to tell PowerShell which of your parameters are capable of accepting data by value or by property name, and just those named script blocks to make it into a working advanced function. Coding it up is not that difficult. And because I relied on both the process block and the for each loop, my function will work whether I specify values via parameter or allow them to attach to parameters via the pipeline. So it works just like a real PowerShell command. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.